Hi, this is Debbie, and today I have a look at the new So Fly set from Neat and Tangled, which will go live this Friday, the 8th of June. I adore the illustrations in this set, and the plane with its giraffe and elephant is of a sufficient size to take centre stage on any card, with minimal extra embellishments required. I love this type of card as they are quick and easy to make. Stamp, colour, die cut, attach to a card base, and away you go. I placed a piece of Neenah Solar White card in the mini MISTI, and as I wanted to Copic colour the images, I stamped with intense black ink from Sam's Stamp, as this ink is Copic friendly and won't smear when colouring. I've placed a piece of spare card under my image while I colour. This will protect my work surface as the markers soak into the card and do show on the reverse. Also, the card will absorb any excess marker and prevent that bouncing back, and as such there is less chance of the markers bleeding outside the lines. I do have a fair few Copic markers, but far from the entire colour set. When I colour an area, I choose a colourway from my markers which has at least 2, but preferably 3 or more values. So for the giraffe's body I used E51 and E53 to start with, but I do have E55 for deeper shadows if needed, and I did bring this colour in the end. I don't have a set way that I colour. I used to always start with the lightest shade and work my way to the darkest and back to the lightest. However, now it varies and can depend on different factors, for example, how large an area is to colour. I don't always have in mind the shadows and highlights I want to create though, and usually start by building up the shadows. Sometimes I start with the lightest colour and work my way up, but sometimes I'll start with a mid-value colour. I don't think it really matters as long as you keep in mind those areas that you want for the deepest shadows and those you want for the highlights, and then blend, blend, blend to get nice transitions between the two. One thing I want to work on moving forwards with my Copic colouring is to expand the colour combinations that I reach for. I usually stick to shades within the same family, so for example with the elephant, I'm using just the warm greys, but as I look at this now, I wonder what it would have looked like if I'd brought in some violets for the shadows. Perhaps BV02 or BV04 would have added some interest. I suggest you check out Catherine Racusin, who is fabulous at colouring and brings in different tones in this way. Moving on to colouring the plane, and I love the B90s range of blues. They are great for colouring all sorts of things and are my go-to for denim. I find them muted enough to appeal to my preference for these types of colours, but also they have enough colour to even appeal on a children's card such as this. I'm concentrating my shadows to the underbelly of the plane because I'm imagining the sun is higher in the sky, and so the highlights will be on the upper surfaces. I was a little unsure on how to colour the plane's different sections. Should I go for a colourful rainbow with each section a different colour? I quickly decided against that option, but was still unsure as to whether to colour it all one colour or not. In these circumstances, I often turn to Google Images to help me decide. I googled children's toy plane, and with the images shown as inspiration, I then from there decided on colouring the main body of the plane with blue, and then with some red highlights. I used tin snips to separate the So Fly dies, lined up the matching die and kept in place with washi tape before running through my die cutting machine. I also stamped and coloured some of the smaller images from the So Fly set to accompany the plane. As these areas are much smaller to colour, I kept just 2 or 3 shades for each colour. I did find that with the green and purple flags that I had some bleeding outside the lines, and despite having a piece of card underneath. I used the zero Copic marker to fix the bleed. I used a pushing motion to encourage the colour back over the line, and in the main I succeeded, and once the die cut you really can't tell there was a bleed there. However, if you find that you still can see the colour even after using the zero marker, then I resort to a white gel pen to fix it. I decided on a couple of Pinkfresh Let Your Heart Decide pattern papers as a background. I love the subtle patterns in this 6x6 paper pad, which add something to the background without overly competing with the main images. I added foam adhesive to the back of all of the images and added them to the white and yellow pattern paper. I then added tape runner to the back of the blue pattern paper and adhered it to the bottom of a top folding A2 card base. I added foam adhesive to the back of the white and yellow pattern paper and adhered this on top. For the sentiment I placed a piece of black card in the mini MISTI, and as I'm going to heat emboss the sentiment, I treated it with an anti-static powder bag to help prevent embossing powder randomly sticking everywhere. I stamped a coordinating sentiment from the So Fly set in clear embossing ink, sprinkled with white embossing powder, tapped off any excess, and heat set before trimming the piece to a skinny banner. I added the sentiment with foam adhesive, butting it up against the white and yellow pattern paper in the lower right corner. I had thought about stamping the trail for the plane on the pattern paper, but forgot, and I didn't want to attempt to add it at this late stage in case I messed up. I did, however, dress the card up with a little sparkle pen over the flags and a coat of crystal glaze over the plane. When adding crystal glaze to a large area such as this, I like to use the nozzle to draw around the edges and then fill in from there. You can also use a pointy tool or a pin to push the glaze to the edges if need be. Hopefully you can see here the sparkle on the flags and the lovely smooth gloss on the plane, and these really add a lovely finishing touch. And that completes my card using the new So Fly set from Neat and Tangled, which will release this Friday. I'll leave links in the YouTube description below to the products that I've used today, as well as a link to the coordinating blog post over at limedoodledesign.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, I'd be delighted if you subscribe to this channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.